All right, Dave. Thanks a lot, man. I appreciate it. That was a good perspective in unprecedented times. It's kind of hard to follow that up with a WOTUS discussion, but I'll do the best I can. So I got 10 minutes, so I'm going to keep this really short for you guys. I don't know how much y'all have followed this or not as far as the change in the definition of waters in the United States. I'm going to give you the most basic summary of where we're at right now, and then I will follow it up by sending this presentation to Dave, and he can disseminate it to you guys, because there's a lot of words on the screen here in this presentation. I'm not going to go into all that detail, but it makes a nice little desk reference if you're trying to understand what is the current status of the regulations, or what is potentially going to be the current status of the regulations as soon as it becomes official. So let's just jump into it real quick. Waters United States. I decided that Waters United States really, it's too amorphous of a term. It really needs a character. So, just scribbling on my notepad one day, I just came up with this guy right here, and I decided to call him the WOTUS. So this is the WOTUS. He speaks for the streams. Dave, you can tell I'm keeping this in vein with your normal sense of humor. Why am I so important? Well, he's important because at some point in the evolution of regulations under the Clean Water Act, any of these waters are considered waters of the United States. They're considered a WOTUS. The territorial seas, traditional navigable waters, perennial streams, all the way up through the tributary system, through intermittent streams, ephemeral streams, impoundments, adjacent waters and wetlands, and so forth and so on, even out into isolated wetlands and isolated waters on the landscape. At some point in time, all of these have been considered waters of the United States, but it has changed quite a bit since the first definitions came out to where we are today. So this is where basically, waters of the United States have extended historically to their maximum extent. After SWANK, that would be, oh goodness, I'm trying to remember what SWANK stands for, but it's 7 o'clock in the morning, I'm having trouble. At any rate, something Water Authority of Northern Cook County, that's what it was. Southern Water Authority of Northern Cook County, or something like that. After that came out, isolated wetlands were no longer considered jurisdictional. After the Rapanos decision in 2006 and its following Rapanos guidance in 2008, all of these areas that just turned gray became case-by-case waters based on whether or not they were considered to have a significant nexus to downstream navigable waters. And then after the Clean Water Rule in 2015, the Obama rule, things changed again based on distances from tributaries or waters in the United States. Wetlands could, in some cases, up to 4,000 feet away, be considered waters in the United States if they met certain criteria and were considered to have a significant nexus. They also threw in the Obama Waters in the United States rule a whole set of special, similarly situated wetlands, depending upon where you were in the country, that could be considered waters in the United States. So that definition got somewhat more expansive than the definition had been under Rapanos, which brings us to where we are today. This is the Trump EPA draft rule, the one that was put out last year. You can see how waters in the United States, the definition was so significantly constricted to just the intermittent and perennial waters and the traditional navigable waters and their immediately adjacent and abutting wetlands. Now, there was a small tweak in the final rule that came out in January 23rd is when this rule came out yet. And I will caveat, this rule has not been published in the Federal Register as of yet. So it is not official, and it won't become official until 60 days after it is published in the Federal Register. assuming a district court does not put an injunction on it. So we'll just have to see what happens. It's not, nothing is set in stone yet. We are still under the post-Rapanos definition of waters in the United States until this rule becomes effective. But the final rule included some interesting language, some interesting tweaks from the draft rule. Wetlands, impoundments, and waters that were cut off from traditional navigable waters by like a levee or some sort of artificial barrier like a road, all of those types of waters were now only considered jurisdictional if depending upon how they were connected via hydrology to the downstream waters of the United States. That would be if they were inundated by flooding in a typical year by the water of the United States. So wetlands that were adjacent to waters of the United States could only be adjacent if they were inundated by flooding from those waters. If they were impoundments, they had to contribute surface water flow to those waters of the United States. And if they were cut off by a levee or similar artificial structure, they had to have some direct hydrologic surface connection, that is a pipe, a lift station, something that connected their water to those downstream navigable waters. Also, this final rule cut out all ephemeral streams. Anything that was ephemeral in nature is no longer considered a water of the United States once this rule goes into effect. Only those waters that are considered intermittent, perennial, or traditionally navigable will be considered waters of the United States. So I'm not going to go too much. I'm not going to go into detail with these definitions. They're in the slide deck. You can read them. These are the different definitions of waters of the United States and what it looked like on the landscape when these definitions were in effect. Swank, the original WOTUS that goes all the way back to 1986, and he's been around a while. The post-Swank Rapanos guidance. You can delve into that if you want to. None of it really matters anymore once this rule comes out. And even the Obama WOTUS rule and all of its complicated definitions are in this slide deck for you to look at if you want. But let's just get to the Trump rule, my favorite. After the Obama rule tried to save all the streams, the Trump replacement rule yanked it back pretty severely. I like to say it. My little animation didn't work there, David, but it basically shrunk the WOTUS to something more manageable as far as the federal government was concerned. Let's break down this rule real quick for you guys so you're familiar with the terminology, because this is the way the Corps is going to start speaking once this rule comes into effect. They're going to start talking about paragraph A waters, paragraph B waters, paragraph C definitions. The rule is, if not anything else, the rule is elegant in its simplicity. The rule has only 3 paragraphs. Paragraph A covers jurisdictional waters, and there are only 4. The territorial seas, waters that are used for interstate commerce, and waters that are subject to ebb and flow of the tide. This goes back to the original definition of waters in the United States under the Clean Water Act, even under the Rivers and Harbors Act, dating way back into the 70s and beyond. So this is nothing new. Tributaries to those waters. Tributaries has a very distinct definition, which we'll get into here in just a second. Impoundments of those jurisdictional waters, I just showed you just a few minutes ago. And then adjacent wetlands to those waters, and that has a very, very specific definition. Paragraph B covers everything that is not a WOTUS, and it starts off by saying anything that was not identified in paragraphs A 1 through 4 is not a WOTUS. And then if you don't get that, it goes into a list of about a dozen other things to make sure you understand these things are not waters in the United States. Things like groundwater, ephemeral features, the list goes on and on. Ditches of certain types, prior converted cropland and so forth, artificial structures and whatnot, artificial lakes and whatnot. A lot of these definitions for non-jurisdictional waters are tied to the caveat that those things were constructed in uplands or in non-jurisdictional waters. So that'll be something that comes up over and over again if there are disagreements over whether or not a man-made or man-induced wetland or water body is now a water of the United States. Key phrases to look out for: those three that I showed you on my drawing: inundated by floodwater, contributes surface water flow, and direct hydrologic surface connection in a typical year. You're going to hear these phrases over and over and over again with regulators. And in my opinion, David, you guys may enter into a new era of potential business here, because we're going to need experts that understand flow regimes on these waters and can prove or disprove whether or not a flow regime is ephemeral, intermittent, or perennial. The tools that the Corps is being given to make these assumptions or make these assertions when they assert jurisdiction are no different than what they've been using for the last 20 years. They're the stuff off of topographic maps. There's stuff off of NOAA websites that show different hydrologic regimes. It's going to be a very much a case-by-case basis as to whether or not something is considered jurisdictional or not based on flow regimes. There are a lot of definitions in paragraph C. So paragraph A, or the four categories. Paragraph B was what's not a water of the United States. Paragraph C goes into all these definitions, and this is where all the details are at. Adjacent wetlands is defined. All of the definitions around tributaries are defined. A typical year is defined. These are the details you really want to get into when you're trying to figure out whether or not a water feature is now a water or would be a water of the United States under this rule. So I'm not going to delve into all those definitions. They're there for you to look at your leisure when you get this slide deck. The graphics that I gave you at the beginning goes over most all of the stuff.
Yeah,
in summary, yeah.
I'll keep going.
You got a question? Yeah. Okay. In summary, I'll just point you to this website. So EPA has a really great website set up for Waters of the United States. You can download all the fact sheets. You can download the rule. You can even take a look at what the current status is on the lawsuits, because notice of intents for suits are already coming in for this particular rule. There's at least two that are posted up there that I'm watching pretty closely. One of them involves whether or not the rule properly took into account effects on endangered species. We'll see where that goes. That's coming from Centers of Biological Diversity. So don't expect this rule to go into effect anytime in the near future. I think 2020 will be a year of watching this unfold, and we'll see where it ends up. But should it end up going into effect, the next logical area that jurisdiction might extend would be at the state level. Basically, the federal government is saying, we want a very small water of the United States definition. States can decide what they want to do. If they want to expand the definition of water of the state and extend protections to those things that are no longer considered waters of the United States, then go for it. They did an analysis in the economic analysis for the rule of which states might take on jurisdiction that is no longer covered by the Clean Water Act and which might not. And this is just a quick and dirty map showing you what might happen should this rule go into effect over the years, which states, and these are in green, may extend jurisdiction or currently already have rules in place that cover jurisdiction beyond those things that are considered waters of the United States in the Navigable Waters Protection Rule under the Trump EPA, and which would not. Looks very, very similar to an election year map of red and blue states. So if you're thinking about red states or blue states, you're pretty much you got a pretty good idea of where jurisdiction might be extended should this rule go into effect.
And then, of course, Matt, we're confused in Colorado.
Yeah. Well, you're not the only state that's confused, Dave. There's a lot of states in that particular category. Where this may end up is another Supreme Court case, and I apologize, my graphics got a little bit screwy on this slide, but another Supreme Court case may be the ultimate end game for this rule as to whether or not it is upheld throughout the United States. If it ends up in the Supreme Court for what would be a fourth Supreme Court case dealing with this topic, It is a much different Supreme Court than what was in place under the Rapanos decision. Only 4 of those justices on the Supreme Court right now were on the Supreme Court during the Rapanos decision, which ended up in a plurality, a no clear majority decision. 5 of those justices now are Republican presidential appointees. 4 of those justices are Democratic presidential appointees. So there is a prediction that if this case gets back to the Supreme Court, it may end up being upheld. So we'll just see what happens. And that's it, Dave. I think I'm over 10 minutes. I apologize, but that's your digest. So if you guys have any questions, you can email them to me, and I'll send this presentation out to Dave. Thanks, Dave.
Hey, thanks, Matt. All right. So, well, we're gonna kind of go on to scheduling here, and we're just gonna go around quick. If anybody has anything that they need a little bit of, if they have time for help or want a little bit of help with something, let's kind of speak out. If you don't have anything you need help with, then kind of keep it silent, and we'll kind of close up the talks today.
Dave, it's Brad. I just need you to get back to me on scopes for Elmore Sand and Gravel, and in the long run, the project in Vancouver as well.
Very good.
No problem, though.
All right. Well, hey, welcome to some of the new people that were on the line this morning. Hey, nice to see you on the line, Kevin. Nice to see you on the line, Rick. And we will talk to you guys later. Have a great week.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Dave. Thank you.